If you grew up as a child in the 1980s, chances are you loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Originally debuting in the gritty black and white comic, the four reptilian heroes were sanitized and toned down for a children's cartoon. Over the decades, the characters would be reimagined and regurgitated countless times, but the most iconic iteration has to be the original Saturday morning designs. It was this particular version that had a couple of arcade games developed by Konami. The second one, Turtles in Time, was an all-time fan favorite beat-em-up and found its way to the Super Nintendo. The Sega Genesis, however, would receive the Hyperstone Heist in 1992. See, Nintendo had a policy at the time that required third-party games released on their consoles to be exclusive. Unlike today when the same game comes out for multiple systems. That was not the case in the 8-bit and 16-bit eras, and if that seems pretty douchey on Nintendo's part, it was. But the NES had been such a massive success that they could get away with things like that. In order to get around this authoritarian requirement and desiring to release their properties on multiple consoles, developers would often remix or rearrange their games to release them on the competing hardware. So, Hyperstone Heist is one such remix. Feeling like a hybrid of the first two arcade games, Konami took existing enemies, bosses, stage elements, and even music, and changed everything just enough to be considered its own thing. Turtles in Time is undoubtedly the preferred game by most players, and it is better, but Hyperstone Heist is still very good. I never played through it up until now, and while the entire game gave me a heavy sense of deja vu, it was very enjoyable and stands as one of the best beat-em-ups available on the Sega Genesis that I've played. The story, if you can call it a story, finds the Turtles' archenemy Shredder having acquired the Hyperstone, basically a MacGuffin that allows him to shrink the Statue of Liberty and steal it. So the Turtles set out to stop him, and that's all. The Hyperstone doesn't factor into the story after that much, and while the idea would have been the perfect opportunity to play with the sense of scale and level design, it goes unfulfilled. Imagine something like Honey, I Shrunk the Turtles, or maybe even Godzilla-sized turtles fighting enemies over a shrunken city, but instead we get the usual boring places like city streets, sewers, and the slightly more exciting, if not overused, Technodrome. So a potentially game-changing concept was thrown out, and instead we get every other type of stage and every other type of Ninja Turtle game. The gameplay formula is pretty basic, and will be familiar to fans of games like Final Fight or Streets of Rage. One or two players pick from the 4 different turtles, each with different weapons, movement, and attack speeds, and then fight their way through the hordes of similar-looking enemies, from the left side of the stage to the right, eventually fighting a boss at the end of the stage. You have a basic attack that strings into a combo, a jump kick, a special move that does heavy damage but drains you of your life just a little bit. And if you position yourself just right, you can also slam enemies into the ground around you. You can dash with the dedicated button, and do a shoulder check or a slide depending on whether you attack or jump while holding it down. While it would be pretty easy to get bored fighting tons of the same foot soldiers with slight color variations and occasionally a robot or two for the entire game, the controls are so responsive and the fight cadence is very satisfying. A game like this can live or die on the strength of its gameplay loop, and Hyperstone Heist, like the other Turtle games from the time, nails it. The AI is very well balanced to apply pressure, but at the same time enemies will hold back, Kung Fu movie style, in order to never really overwhelm you. I found most of the game to be a little easy by Ninja Turtle standards, but then the game introduced a boss gauntlet on the second to last stage, and the final stage cranked up the difficulty even more and introduced several cheap traps. By the end it had actually tested me. When you continue, you are set back to a certain point instead of just resurrecting right where you died. So while you'll probably coast through the first 3 stages, the last 2 require some skill, which is nice. Also, the game is rather short. The graphics are impressive for a Genesis game, colorful and detailed with good animation and effects. The sound design, however, is a mixed bag. The soundtrack is flat out excellent, pushing the Genesis to belt out rocking chiptunes among some of the best 16-bit songs I've ever heard. But while the sound effects are also good, the handful of digital voices in the game sound horrendous.
My toad! My toad!
Say what now?
Let it show!
I don't I understand you.
Cowabunga!
One more time.
Cowabunga!
Coward bunghole? Are you having a stroke? Do you smell burnt toast? Voices usually aren't that good on the Genesis anyway, so it's not unexpected. But the stellar soundtrack, tight gameplay, and great graphics more than make up for it. While it might not top Turtles in Time, Hyperstone Heist still deserves your attention if you're a TMNT fan or enjoy beat-em-up games in general. It lacks imagination or variety, but it's excellent on a technical level, and a great bit of mindless fun to play. Like most Konami games from the era, it's a well put together game with no real problems, besides the horrendous voice clips, and a little bit of an unexpected difficulty spike near the end you may or may not appreciate. And don't be surprised if the music sticks in your head for a little while afterwards. If you want a good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game on the Sega Genesis, you should definitely check it out. Final score? 8. Pros: tight and responsive controls, satisfying gameplay loop, best-in-class Genesis graphics, a rocking chiptune soundtrack. Cons: very little variety or imagination, short length, awful sounding voice clips,